Something that is going to be huge, I think, next year for enablers is to have a change management certification. I think a lot of SaaS companies first are going to ask for that. The number one skill in change management is communication, because you need to communicate with leaders, you need to communicate cross functionally, you need to be able to communicate to the sellers. One of the biggest things that I look for in an interview situation, I definitely look for genuine curiosity, because in my opinion, without it, you will not be able to help the client or buyer see the problem that they didn't even know they had.
What should we measure to at least predict some level of success from our managers that they really adopted a new framework?
You can measure a couple of different ways.
Hello, everyone. This is Michael Ocean, founder and CEO at Sales Enablement. Today, I'm super pumped. I get Crystal Nikosey on the call. So many of you in SaaS know her very well from LinkedIn and other places. She's super active at Sales Enablement Collective and other places that we all hang out. But for those who don't know you, Crystal, please, the floor is yours. Just tell a little bit about your background.
Yeah, I'm Crystal Nikosey. I am an enabler. I'm actually your favorite enabler. I have a lot of content out there, Instagram, TikTok. I've been in enablement for about 8 years now. I was in sales, as I was a seller before that, carried a bag. I'm very competitive. I try to mix my approach to sales reps in a very holistic way. I try to convey that, a lot of times to like LinkedIn or, whatever platform. And I absolutely love enablement. I love where it's going. I'm so much information to absorb, but I love it. I absolutely love it.
I love that. Thanks for sharing a little bit about yourself. Now, you you said enablement is changing, where it's going. So I want to just to get your thoughts on it before we start chatting about our topic, change management today, which is very important. What's happening with enablement? What's going on?
It's not so much like what is happening in enablement. It's not starting with enablement. It's starting with sales. It's starting with the revenue teams, right? The go-to-market teams. It's starting there because of the technology. Well, the technology started it, right? And organizations are like, how can we get our hands on this? And so it's not even just in, their product, but internally, right? And, there's all of these companies that are fighting for, market share. And so many different companies are now outing AI. And it's like, what is a sales rep supposed to do? Everything has moved at a breakneck speed, and for everyone, and especially for sellers, right? So what needs to happen is almost a sales transformation, right? In terms of AI. Um, I think it's definitely a change management initiative, right? And that needs to start on, the entire go-to-market team. It needs to be fully aligned. I mean, this is a big shift. This is like digital transformation, right? But this is like AI transformation, right? And so something that is going to be huge, I think, next year for enablers is to have a change management certification. I think a lot of SaaS companies first are going to ask for that. They're going to require that. I know some enablers who have kind of the more costly certificates, and there's one that I love. It's on the Sales Enablement Collective in their course catalog. They do that course, so I would highly recommend that one if you're looking at getting a certification. It's $500. It's nothing crazy. I just think it's going to be huge. I think it's going to be huge next year. Enablers really need to, because of how many enablers there are now, any little thing like that, I shouldn't say little, but anything that is going to separate you, especially if you're in a job hunt. You got to have that next year, because organizations are already thinking about this sort of AI transformation, right, for their organizations.
Interesting. So let's talk specifics. You mentioned about this course that the Sales Enablement Collective is offering right now, and it seems like a great course. What do they expect to learn our enablement, people? they go and take the course, what is it that they're going to learn that they can apply tomorrow?
I think they're going to learn a lot of the models. They're going to, understand how to approach massive projects like this, right? Even though we already do an element of change management, on a kind of usually on a smaller scale, it's going to be massive. We're not going to turn into like project managers, right? But just really sitting down, starting from scratch. How are we going to attack this, right? How are we going to plan this? How are we going to execute this? How are we going to measure this, right? And it's getting that many people um bought bought in first, right? And then trained on whatever it is. And then you've got the certification process, right? And then after the certification process comes like, did you master this, right? Are you executing it in calls, whatever it is? And then it comes measurement. How did, where are we now? Like, what does this look like, right? In terms of data, metrics, KPIs, things like that. So enablement's really going to have to know how to navigate those waters.
Mm.
It's not necessarily something that we've always done. We've always collaborated with product marketing, customer success. We've always collaborated, but we have never been involved really. I mean, digital transformation was a huge one, but kind of like this AI transformation, um, it's going to be all hands on deck. A lot of it is going to fall to enablement because we are the ones who need to enable the sellers, right? Um, it's going to be a big thing. I truly believe that.
This is really interesting, and what you're saying make a lot of sense. Obviously, like when we purchase products or start looking at projects that we want to bring into our organization, depending on the function who's going to benefit from this, we have different people who own, let's say, at least the starting point of any of these implementations, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think with AI specifically for our go-to-market teams, is it something that enablement should, own at the beginning of the cycle, or how do you see it?
That's tough because, enablement is still being defined. It really is. There's always question of should enablement be responsible for win rate, for example.
Mhm.
There's so there's a lot of things that are still changing or still evolving. I could see enablement owning it, absolutely, but it's got to be hyper collaborative, right? It's got to be really working, all the leaders working together, agreeing on everything, outlining basically like an SLA, right? And this is how it's going to go. This is the model that we're going to use. Here's all the steps. That's the part that I see enablement. Um, it's gonna it's gonna come in 2025, and it's gonna happen pretty quick.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Like again, to your point, like things are changing. Organizations, everybody's just yelling about it. Let's do more with less. Let's bring AI and add it to our workflow. And I
yeah.
want to take a step back, and I've seen even in our own client base, the most successful organizations they focus on the big business problem before even looking at any solutions. And I want to bring a real case, real life example. I literally had this conversation this afternoon with a CRO and his VP. So the challenge is
Mhm.
again making coaching and making it continuous after onboarding is done, and really work
Yes.
towards building an everboarding, let's say, program. There are quite a few challenges inside the organization that tech might be able to help, or maybe not. It's a fine line, and I'm going to share this specifics. My managers don't have the skill sets and time to even assign anything to reps for improvements. So just imagine if your platform can, let's talk about skill gap assessments, do the skill gap assessments. Even the idea of my managers get in and build a program or, you know, practice session for reps on an individual level is something that, you know, we don't even expect them to do. So let's just think about change management in this setting. For my selfish need, I want to send this to my, my friend who's trying to actually get this done as a CRO. Where does he need to
Yeah.
start? And he said that I need to go through change management. But what does change management really means in this setting.
Okay, so he's basically saying that his frontline sales managers, it's not a thing for them to coach after onboarding, whatever it is. They just don't have the skill set, they don't have the time, and he's trying to get that implemented. Like the CRO is trying to get
Exactly.
that implemented. Okay, so the change management, for coaching for the sales leaders, it first starts with the enabler understanding the culture. Okay. You've got to understand the culture of the organization. If it's a more progressive company with younger, typically younger sellers, then you're going to want to approach it a little bit differently in terms of what framework you use, right? In order to coach. Are you using a platform, right? Like, what is this going to look like? Who needs to be involved? Where do we need buy in? What roles are we going to ask of the sales managers? What role are we going to ask of the VP of sales? What role is the CRO going to play? And you've got to get buy-in from each of those people, and they have to abide by that. They absolutely have to support you. You have to, as an enabler, again, another SLA with the executives that, hey, you're going to help me and do this part. Because without sales leadership buy-in, enablement is dead in the water. If they cannot get buy-in from sales leaders, at the top or, frontline, enablement's dead in the water. You're going to be spinning your wheels. They're not going to see you as as a value add. They're simply going to look at you like a cost center. And why do you think enablement is the first to go?
Uh-huh.
So you've got to plan all of that ahead of time. You have to understand, how are the frontline sales managers going to coach? And here's the framework for that. So they're going to need training. It starts from the top down. So they're going to need training on how to approach reps. Then this is kind of where the culture comes back in, right? How to approach reps, and they need to know the framework inside and out. And I'll give an example. I implemented the competency framework, right? What's so important in coaching, okay? If you can't coach to metrics, you can't coach to KPIs. Your sales managers have to know, first of all, how to coach. And the way that you're going to get behavior change, which is massive in any change management initiative. It's all about behavior change. That's
Uh-huh.
what it's all about, right? And so, in order to do that, I love using the competency-led frameworks. But you can't stop at simply the competency and not outline the indicators, problematic indicators. What are the behaviors of negotiation? What is good? What is problematic? And it is a heavy lift. I'll tell you that, just, creating that, but I'm sure with, AI, it could definitely change. But for example, your sales leaders need to know how to influence behavior. It's huge,
Uh-huh.
it's huge. And so you've got to think about it from that perspective as well. So change management is a skill that enablers use all the time, whether they know it or not. And it's got to start from the top. And the leaders need to know first, and then obviously you roll it out to the sellers. Two different training programs, one for the sales leaders, one for sales reps, and different messaging for both of them. And that's the tactical piece, right? But all of the planning is up front, and by the time you start to execute, like, you should know everything from A to Z, and how it's going to be executed, how it's going to be measured. How are you going to be measured specifically, right? Like, not only the success of the initiative, but how
Uh-huh.
well did I do? So all of these things you've got to think about, and you've got to start planning those. You've got to work with leadership and doing all of that. So that's why I say that right now, with this sort of AI transformation, again, so important, to really hone that skill, upskill if you need to, get that certification if you need to, because even though our initiatives sometimes are big, especially like when implementing like a CRM, right? Or especially if you're an enabler for a large organization, that takes so much change management, right? Especially for like 500 sellers and above.
Do you believe your reps burn leads practicing on client calls? When it comes to giving them one-on-one coaching sessions, you just don't have the bandwidth, so you get rid of them altogether? Or maybe you notice that your team spends a lot of time on non-revenue tasks like taking notes, updating CRM, or drafting emails. These are the exact challenges we solve for other revenue leaders like yourself. With Sell Me the Spend AI Coach, you can offer your reps role-play sessions at scale while automating one-on-one coaching sessions based on your best practices and methodology. Also, AI will take care of all their non-revenue tasks, like note-taking, CRM updates, draft the email for them, so they can focus on constant improvement while you're focusing on one thing and one thing only: revenue growth. If you're interested in learning more about the clients we are working with or use cases that might be beneficial to you, check us out at sellmethespend.ai.
But yeah, change management, it's going to be a big thing. So that's kind of how I look at it. All of the planning and strategy has to happen up front, and it's got to be thorough. Everyone has to know what their role is, what their responsibilities are, in the project, or multiple projects. Everybody's got it. It's the number one skill in change management is communication. So you have got to have a very high level of communication, because you need to communicate with leaders, sales leaders. You need to communicate with, cross-functionally. You need to be able to communicate to the sellers. So there's a lot there. And I would say communication is probably a top skill set for change management.
Very interesting. I
One of it.
appreciate the breakdown. This is really helpful. I want to
Okay.
dig in a little bit more into this because it's very interesting to me, and I don't have, most of the answers. Like, what I'm trying to understand sometimes when I, go on these conversations with CROs, especially, because at the end of the day, we want to help our revenue team do better. So as enablers, as providers, it's all about the, fact that revenue growth is top of mind. And for this specific use case, we are looking at a fast growing company. So the headcount is growing, the revenue is doubling next year, which is, again, another topic for another conversation. But and they already know where they struggle in terms of like skill sets, but where to start, I think, is the bigger problem. So the mindset is maybe we start with our reps and find the skill gaps, start building that skill sets for them through practice, through coaching. But I always like to take a look at the bigger picture. How about our managers? Who's going to reinforce this? Like, if they don't understand that, how do we expect people in their team to actually follow? So what would be a better
Yep.
practice in this situation? Where should we start? Yes, it's a whole project for everyone.
So this is going to be a little, I don't know how unconventional, but where I would personally start is your sales processes. Start with your sales
Mhm,
processes. Take a look. Take a look at messaging. Take a look at discovery questions. Is it inbound? Is it outbound? What does inbound say? What does outbound say? You've got to make sure that all of your sales stages are documented, right? And exactly what happens in each of those stages. So that, value prop, your email sequences, like all of that has to be in line, first, right?
mhm,
That has to be in line first. So make sure, identify bottlenecks, because that's what you're trying to do when you do that,
mhm.
identifying bottlenecks. And if you don't
Yep.
have it documented, get it documented like
Mhm,
ASAP. There's a ton of consulting firms out there that you can reach out to. I used to work at the Sales Collective. And that's one thing that we absolutely did, is we built sales process. So I would start there, identifying any bottlenecks, and then absolutely start with leadership. C-suite first, get their buy-in. Um, if you're going to make an ask of, maybe specific tasks, or here's what I'd like to ask of you type thing, you maybe want to meet with them once a week. All of that has to be identified up front, as
mhm,
well. And then you start with frontline sales managers. You start with frontline sales managers. Again, it's not only the training, right? But enablement has to take it one step further. It's not how many reps have taken my training, it is how many reps are doing what was expected when I built this or when I planned this. Are we above that or are we below that, and why?
mhm.
You, it's Enablement isn't just about training. It doesn't stop there. And if you're stopping there and you're not measuring and benchmarking, you're throwing spaghetti against a wall and hoping it sticks if you're not measuring that. So that's kind of how I would approach it. Strategy planning all up front, starting from the top down. You have to, because it's like I said, enablement's really dead in the water if they don't have stakeholder buy-in.
Interesting. So first and foremost, you get your C-suite involved for whatever
Yes.
action you want to take. This is a
Mhm.
obvious step. Second, we look at our processes. We are looking at our processes, your sales process. Let's see where the bottleneck is, where we are actually losing money, or maybe it's just top of funnel that we don't bring relevant
Yeah.
leads, or maybe after the disco calls things will drop. And then we start with frontline managers. Now, I wanted to ask you something, Crystal. I don't know if it's a crazy idea, but I had another great guest on the show, Taylor Jargens. He used to lead enablement with Jeremy Jacobs at Alt0, and then when Okta bought Alt0, they brought in to actually build it from scratch for them. And he said something interesting. I don't know if it's really like doable everywhere, but he said we started with one level higher, for VPs. Said yeah, even VPs should go through, let's say, these
Oh,
practices, whether it's role
100%.
play, whether it's you're reading the material, and go through actually certification programs, not because they have to and we say it, because they see the value we are going to give to their sales managers. We're going to give to their,
Love
reps.
that. Yeah. You have to get everyone, if they have sellers or they have sales managers reporting to them, that's where you need to start. And it goes down VP, whatever it is, directors, frontline sales managers. And I'll tell you, it's going to be a little bit of a different program or a different way of approaching, right? Each role. That's what's really important, is that you differentiate between it, because technically, I mean, who are enablement's customers? Sales reps, sales managers,
Mm-hmm.
um, the sales organization. They're our clients, they're our customers. So we have to approach them in a way that is like, are we following the buyer journey, right? And you got to just think like that in terms of how to approach each role, and what their responsibilities are going to be, and what's going to resonate with them, right? Based on their role. Obviously, sales reps are going to want to learn the very tactical things: conversation, messaging, overcoming objections. How can I be more effective? Maybe during discovery or demo, whatever it is, right? They're going to be more focused on those types of things. And a CRO is obviously going to be focused on much more strategic things, and they're going to probably be, everybody has a boss, right? So board members. So it, but you absolutely have to get that buy-in and have to approach each of your customers, and really understand what resonates with them. What are their pains? What are their challenges? Where is their mind right now? What is this going to look like in a year? I mean, there's a lot there, but enablers have to have that curiosity. They have to have a little bit of vision as well, be strategic, in all of this, in everything that encompasses change management. But yeah, you always got to start from top down.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Look, that made me think about another question. Most of the people I'm chatting right now, the current market, at least like this is my ICP maybe, I see that they're moving either up market. They're testing new ICPs. They're switching from inbound to outbound motions. And some of these growing companies, again, if you're talking about large enterprise, that's a different story. You got resources,
Right.
you can take your time. But if you're at Series B, Series C, and you're growing like crazy, so you most probably by at this point, you did many things as crappy, which is okay, just to
Oh
build a
yeah.
playbook, to test the market and see where you sit and you can position, your solution to certain problems. So like change management is, to me, it's really, really hard because what do you want to do? Like you got your sales managers, you got them in, maybe you promoted your high performing reps, whatever the case might be, you either
Yeah.
have to run a whole program coaching the coach to learn how
Yeah.
to do it. And they just don't have the time. It's like, look, I know what's not working, top of mind, based on numbers that I'm tracking. I want to get this fixed. I know I have to do so much more with this change management, but I need to do things today. So can we find a balance between running things at the front line while, building for the future? So whether it's like a program for sales managers or getting VPs involved, how do you envision like helping these clients that are growing extremely fast? They need to test so many different things that maybe they never done in the past, at least not, with a full force right today. So I wanted to hear your perspective on this.
Yeah. I would certainly never recommend ad hoc enablement ever. There is no change management initiative in organizations that are very early on. I think a lot of organizations will start looking at enablement teams or enablement person, maybe 15 sales reps and above. And you're just going to have to do some things ad hoc. You are. There could be, change management in terms of your strategy, your strategic enablement strategy, and rolling all of that out. But yeah, I mean, sometimes you just got to do things ad hoc. Here's what I'll say. The caveat to this is, or what must, preface this is, why do you feel like you need that?
Uh-huh.
And have them give you a reason and say, after that, just say, hey, I totally get that. Let's take a look at the data. Let's make sure that the data is supporting this request. And a lot of times you're able to talk to a sales manager and say, hey, based on the data, based on, the competencies, based on your coaching, whatever, however you want to say it, they really don't need this training. They actually would benefit from doing something a little bit different like this. And I would explain that we're looking at changing behaviors. And here is the program that is going to help them to change that behavior. Because a lot of sales managers, they want to walk into a one-on-one or a coaching session, and they want to talk about numbers. They want to talk about metrics. They want to talk about deals. No, your one-on-ones should be all about skill development, and at a competency level, right? And then even deeper than that, like, what is this behavior supposed to look like? What systems are we using? So there's definitely a lot there, but in an early stage, it's like where it's so critical to build those foundations, those good foundations. And if those foundations are good, the sales process is good. Sometimes you might have to do things ad hoc, but always ask ahead of time, like, where are you getting this from? Like, did somebody on your team just tell you I need discovery training? Or whatever, whatever it is. Um, but yeah, always support what you're doing with data. You should not be training, creating programs for anything that you do not have data to support.
To your point, like when you're early, obviously, like you just need to test. You have tons of
Yeah,
hypotheses, and it should apply to everyone. One of the things that I'm shocked when I see enablers getting judges, like, hey, you have to fix things. Oh no, how about you like testing different ICPs, or changing messaging from marketing, or product is testing a lot because you're trying to figure out what actually works for where you are at today at this stage, and many things are not defined yet. Now,
right.
for bigger organizations, like they let's say they're at 50 plus sellers org and they already have the sales process nailed and they know the problems, and they struggle with some cultural issues, like because they never actually maybe thought about building that coaching culture. And now they notice the problem that, all right, during onboarding, we do a little bit of a practice. People might be ready. It could always be better, but the problem happens when they go on field. Although we can track it, nobody's actually coaching after. So we don't have that continuous, process. And now I want to bring that change as a CRO. My VPs are aligned. They're ready to help. What should I do? Should I just say, hey, this is mandatory. Let's go. And because of this numbers and this is going to happen? Or should I look at this more of a gradual, path? What would be
Yeah.
the best way if an enabler comes to the room and look at this problem?
Yeah. The way that I would approach this is, understand why the culture is the way that it is, first of all. Is it a result of toxic leaders? Is it a result of a few bad apples, right? Toxic people, just bad attitudes, right? Like you don't want to just simply look at numbers and say, oh, this person's bad, get rid of them.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, you definitely want to understand why the culture is the way that it is. Okay, so once you understand that, changing a culture is probably one of the greatest and biggest things that a revenue organization can do, an entire organization, right? If you can carry it through to other departments, but obviously enablers, if you're focused simply on sales, then you want to work on that. The way that I would actually start this, though, of course, the planning up front, right? What's going to happen? What am I measuring? What do I need from this role, this role, this role? What do I need? Do I need anything from them? And then what you need to start again is with leader, like C-suite. They're going to be involved in a lot of that. And you're going to get a lot of buy-in in order to change the culture. In most cases, you get buy-in pretty easily from the C-suite. Now, where you may hit some resistance is with sales managers. In order to get sales leaders to create a more open culture, let's say in coaching, right? They have to do that day in and day out. It has to be consistent across the board. And that's why frameworks are so important, because that ensures that everyone is following the same framework and not, a lot of times when you have disjointed sales orgs, um, sometimes sales leaders are coaching however the hell they want. And it's
Uh-huh.
like, that is insane because one sales manager could be a great sales coach. And so, of course, his team is going to do better. And maybe the AE that you promoted because they nailed their quota every month, which they have zero skill set of actually being a leader, right? So you need to take a look at all of that, right? Like, how do we develop this culture of coaching? And then it has to be with the frontline sales managers to do it consistently, because enablers aren't, sure, we can coach to some extent, but it's really the sales managers that should be doing this. And depending on whatever framework you want to implement, but it has to be consistent. It has to be across all functions. Um, and when I say across all functions, I mean just some collaboration with, like, hey, we're trying to improve our culture. Here's, what it looks like. Here's where we are today. Let's take a look at your department. How does that shift with where we're trying to go and where we're at now? Like, what can you do? How can we influence sales reps, right? How can we influence CSM? So you've got to work with other departments in order to, it's got to be a complete, organizational change. It's big and it takes time. It's not something that you can whip up in a month. It could take an entire year. Um,
Uh-huh.
but yeah, sales managers have to create this coaching culture. They do. One of the biggest things that I look for in an interview situation, I definitely look for curiosity, genuine curiosity. Um, because in my opinion, without it, you will not be able to help the client or buyer see the problem that they didn't even know they had. That takes genuine curiosity in order to uncover that. And that's where a lot of things lie, right? In a problem that clients never knew that they even had, right? You've got to make that realization. So I would definitely look at genuine curiosity. But the other one I would look at is coachability. How
Uh-huh.
coachable are they? Are they seasoned and are they set in their ways? Or are they the 24-year-old graduate or 23-year-old graduate who is just like hungry and ready to go, right? So sometimes you got to take a look at things like that. The coachability of someone, and it's got to start at the very beginning, right? Like, should we even hire this person? And that's again why competency frameworks come into play, because at that level, and when hiring talent acquisition, they've got to know, when we hire an account executive, what does success look like? What competencies do I need to master, right? And then it's that's how they hire, based on those competencies, because that's how a sales rep is going to be measured. It makes no sense to hire a sales rep and not match that up, right, with how they're going to be successful. So yeah, there's a lot that goes into it, but it
I
definitely
know.
starts talent acquisition. That's where it really starts.
Look, you keep talking and ideas keep coming. So I'm going to ask my last question. I want to tie it back to what you were saying about start with the managers when we are rolling out, let's say, frameworks. It makes a lot of sense to your point. At that stage, when you have 50 sellers, you need to start. I mean, maybe you had to start it yesterday, but I mean, it's in front of you right now. You need that standardization. It's not a joke. You
Yeah.
need to do that to be able to really measure things moving forward. But we know change is absolutely difficult, like especially for frontline managers. I practice it this way, and I heard it many, many times. This is how it worked. It's still gonna work. But maybe we can build a repeatable process for our organization, even if your practice is the best, if it's not aligned with what we decide to do for so many factors. Let's just imagine we picked a framework and we start with sales managers and said you need to adapt to it, you need to learn it in order to be able to help your, you know, your reps. Are there certain things that we need to track? Let's say if they go through training or they go through, coaching sessions, whether enablement owns it, I don't know, maybe VP gets involved or whoever is more knowledgeable about this. What should we measure to at least predict some level of success from our managers that they really adopted a new framework and to be able to communicate it with our reps? Like, are there certain things that we can actually, measure?
I mean, really, what you can measure a couple of different ways, right? You can take a look at the velocity metrics, right? You can take a look at those. And another thing that a lot of enablers are starting to do, I love to hear about enablers that are focusing specifically on tools, right? Because that is a huge, huge resource for us. So what I mean by that is, like, let's take Gong for instance, right? Gong is just going to get more and more incredible. They're the leader in the space, and they innovate like nobody's business. And there's so much you can set up inside of Gong to be able to track. You're able to, set up smart trackers and actually get, are the reps saying this? Are the reps doing this? Is the behavior changing? Is it happening on the conversations? And so you've got to get all of that set up, right? You got to really make sure that you are using your tools to the best of your ability. But yeah, this is why I like the competency so much, simply because it's a lot easier to align to specific metrics, or to specific KPIs, right? Your competencies are a combination of either skills, process, or behaviors. And that's why I love it so much, because again, you can align. Let's take, for example, let's say that you're doing something on prospecting, right? Like, what are we going to look at for prospecting, right? Number of new leads, right? Or booked meetings, right? You're gonna want to align that competency based on all of the indicators to a specific metric. Now, is that possible in every situation? No. But enablement is starting to get being able to get, because of tools. And again, as enablement continues to evolve, we're starting to really be able to start drawing that solid line instead of just a dotted line. But right now, things are still a dotted line, because when you deal with people, when you deal with behavior change, there's always going to be that dotted line, right? Because we are not directly responsible for them, in terms of quota and numbers and coaching. Yes, we provide a lot. We do the training, we do the content, and then there's stuff happening at the strategic level. But yeah, it's definitely becoming more of a solid line, but there is still a lot of that dotted line stuff happening, right? So it's not going to work out in every situation, but work with RevOps and try to get as much data as you possibly can, tweak as you go, right? If you're like, okay, here's our competencies, and here's what they're doing in coaching, it's not, they're not doing enough according to Gong. So where is this gap? And then it's like you can quickly pull like different levers, right? Like, okay, we actually don't need objection handling. We actually need, more discovery. Or it may not even be like a really intense training, right? It could be something super simple that the manager just needs to tell them, right? Like so there's a lot that's involved there. But there's a lot of different ways that we can try to measure. And again, that's why I love the competencies, because I'm not going to say it's easy to align. You do have to work with sales leaders very heavily in order to have them help you, defined, and also not only help you, but agree that by doing this behavior change, it's going to impact this metric. Like I said, sometimes it'll work out, sometimes it won't. But yeah, I would absolutely go through that process. And with the coaching, that's kind of how you have to measure it. You have to use your tools.
Appreciate you sharing your word of wisdom. And I guess now we,
Thank
we
you.
can see like overall why it's so important to really take change management seriously at different levels, of inside our orgs. And anything else we needed to add before we say goodbye to our audience?
I don't think specifically about change management. I think we talked a lot about it. Now, if somebody is looking for a certificate, something like that, and they want to ask some questions about it, I'm not like an expert on that, but I can certainly recommend some enablers. I love SECs because I know Dell. We actually delivered. We were speakers last year at the Revenue Enablement Society conference in San Diego. We did change management and
Oh,
competency-led frameworks. So she's the change management expert. So if you want to get even more, even deeper with change management, Dell is absolutely the person to do that with. So
there we
that's
go.
what else I would say is, if anybody has questions about any certifications or getting in touch with other enablers, I'm always open. I'm like an open book. So just let me know.
There we go. So should they reach out on LinkedIn? Would that be fair to say that?
LinkedIn. Yep.
All right,
Connect with
awesome.
me. Yeah.
Awesome. Look, I enjoyed the conversation. Thank you very much for taking the time. And you guys hopefully learned something from it. And until next time, bye now.